Hello, it's JJ Lee from the shuttergoesclick.blogspot.com, and today we're going to take a quick look at early point and shoot cameras and test a feature of those cameras that they were never really designed to do, and that is long exposures in low light without a flash. Of course, these cameras used to be dirt cheap, but now a whole new generation of film shooters have discovered the pleasures of the compact camera with an onboard flash. The onboard flash started in 1975 with the Konica C35EF, and since then there have hardly been any consumer cameras, film or digital, without one. Now, one could argue these cameras had creative limitations with all the automation that came with them, but they were convenient, handy cameras able to take pictures in low light. What would we have done without that onboard flash? That said, photographers have been using these cameras for years in ways they were never intended. So for example, on a Nikon L35AF, one of my personal favorites, there's no option to turn on the flash under bright sunny conditions. Now, many other compact cameras allow you to do this, but not in the case of the Nikon L35AF. And there is a trick. You stick it in a bag in a bright sunny day and you take a light reading of the inside of your bag, and then the flash pops out and you're ready to go. And of course, the results are very satisfying. But there's another side to it. There's the dark side. Turning the flash off in low light and relying on the widest aperture and slowest shutter speed of your everything auto compact camera. And that's the question today. How slow can the shutter go click? And here's the thing, I've always believed the specifications listed with regard to the slowest shutter speed by the camera makers has been based on normal program-based usage. But these types of cameras can shoot far slower and in lower light than indicated. And now we can find out with the help of a stopwatch app on my old Nokia device. So let's get testing. Here's the lineup. The Nikon One Touch f2.8 at 1/8 of a second. The Nikon L35AF, the first autofocus camera by Nikon, f2.8 at 1/8 of a second. And then the third iteration of the L35 series, the Nikon AF3 f2.8 at 1/11 of a second. Then we have the Minolta Hi-Matic AF, again at f2.8 at 1/8 of a second. The Minolta Hi-Matic S2 f2.8 at 1/8 of a second. The Canon SureShot 2, I don't have the SureShot 1, I'm not sure where I misplaced it. f2.8 at 1/8 of a second, and the Canon AF35ML for mega lens at f1.9 at 1/4 of a second. And finally, and not least, the Mamiya M at f2.8 at 1/8 of a second. And then you've noticed there's a bit of a pattern. They play it safe. It's f2.8 at 1/8 of a second. But is that true? Let's talk about how we're going to test it. The methodology is a little bit crude, but I believe it'll work. I just put a little black tape on the back of masking tape. I've covered up the CDS eye, the electronic eye that measures the light. I've dialed down the ISO, and what I'm going to do is either keep the flash down, or if there is a flash on, flash off option, I've left it off. And as you can see in the shot, there is that little Nokia phone with its stopwatch there. It's going to keep things pretty accurate. The frame rate is such that you're going to see a 5/100th difference, but the shutter could open or close in anywhere plus or minus 5/100th of a second. But it's good enough for our purposes to see if it falls under 1/8 or a 1/4 second or a 1/2 second. We can make it work. So let's begin with the Nikon One Touch, also known as the L35AF number 2. All right, here we go. Boom, there goes the flash popping up because I forgot that it would do that. we're going to have to put it's loading the capacitor, but we're just going to push it right back down so it won't trigger or fire off, and then we will push the shutter and we'll be able to read the stopwatch of when it opens and when it closes to get a rough estimate of how long the shutter will go open. So here's the shutter press right now. And here we are releasing the shutter. It's about 27:04 and 27:09. Now we're going to find out when it closes. It's still open. And it's closed. And I have no idea. We're going to have to look at the stopwatch. Hold on. All right, so it stopped between 29:43 and 29:48. I'm just going to look at the start number and I'll give you the total exposure time. All right, that was actually quite exciting. 2.34 seconds was the exposure time, give or take. There's a swing of 0.05 seconds at the start or the end, so you can shave off a whole tenth of a second if you want, but that's pretty impressive. It's definitely over 2 seconds. All right, here we go with the Nikon L35AF at f2.8 at 1/8 of a second. That's what they say. Let's hold down the flash and see what we can do here. So we're talking at 3239 it went off, and it looks like the shutter closed at around 3367. That's a shutter time of 1.28 seconds. Once again, give or take 10, 15, even 20 hundredths of a second. We can go from a second and a quarter to a second and a half, more or less. Our third camera is what you could call the third camera of the Nikon L35AF series. It's known as the AF3 or the One Touch 2. Please note that the camera has a loose battery door, which I'm fixing, and it'll be perfect once I fix it. Note my finger is holding the flash off option button, and for some instinctual reason I'm also holding down the flash with my middle finger. I guess it's habit now. So let's see what the shutter can do. There goes the shutter, and look at that, it's surprising. Some sort of flash diffuser popped up as well, possibly because the autofocus has noticed that I'm really quite close to the camera. My face is looming over it, so that's a surprise right there. Well, it looks like it's 2637 is when it closed, and it opened at 2426 with that dramatic diffuser popping up. And I would say the time is 2 1/8 of a second to 2 1/4. Let's call it that. Okay, up next is the Minolta Hi-Matic AF autofocus. I have to say, staring at a shutter opening and closing online in a video could be considered odd, but instead I find it quite fascinating, and I hope you do too. I suppose you could argue there is a practical reason for finding the slowest shutter speed at the maximum aperture. Listed is an EV, generally of EV6, but clearly the cameras can handle much lower light. And if you're able to do this experiment with your own point and shoot camera, number one, I'd love to see it and you can tell me your results. But number two, we can get a true low light, lowest light value under which conditions can you use your camera. So if you own any of these cameras, you've just found out how low you can go. How dark of a room can you successfully expose the film? So I suppose it's not in vain. It's not pure silliness. Anyways, I've said my 2 bits. We should carry on. Here we go. It's opened at 5.33, and it looks like it's closing at 6.11, which gives us 0.78 seconds, which is around 3/4 of a second, which really surprises me because I thought this camera, the Minolta Hymatic AF, could stay open far longer than that. I have a recollection of being in a store trying this camera and it staying open for quite a while, and yet it has not. So I suppose that's why we do the experiment, to confirm our perception of how long the shutter is open. Here's the Minolta Hymatic S2, which indeed could have been the one that was the long shooter that made me click, maybe realize that these cameras could do more than what was listed or what I thought they were capable of. One thing you should note about this particular camera, the Hymatic S2, is it no longer has the rocker badge on the barrel or on the lens ring. More importantly, it's a zone focus. It's the one camera here that is not an autofocus. So in some ways one could argue it doesn't belong with the other cameras, but it's the same generation, the same technology is working in terms of the shutter and the exposure metering. So I think it qualifies, and to be honest, it's quite a dandy little camera. Okay, it's opened at 2968. It's still open. Still open. Clearly this is the one I bought at the pawn shop. I've obviously confused my cameras. And it's closed at 3144, which gives us 1.76 seconds, or 1 3/4 seconds. That's more like it. Perhaps this is the camera I found in the pawn shop that just seemed to stay open forever. We're down to our last 3 cameras. On the table now is the Canon Sure Shot, the second Sure Shot. The first camera with the electric eye on the side. Here we go. Well, it looks like the shutter opened at 12.18 and it is shutting at 12.51. An odd number because it comes out to 0.32 seconds, which doesn't really match any standard shutter speed. Maybe you could call it 1/4 of a second, but I'm just going to use I think I'm going to probably have to use the decimal, so 0.32 seconds, because it doesn't really match up very well with any standard shutter speed. Well, here's the funny thing. It was so slow that I actually tried it another time just to make sure, and indeed it is a fast shutter. Not necessarily the most night hawkish of them all. Up next is the Canon ML, or AF 35 ML for mega lens. Not really mega lens, but look at that, an f1.9 on a 40mm lens. I really looked for this camera. It's an Andy Warhol camera, as many of these cameras were. There are pictures of Andy Warhol using this camera. Here's an interesting thing. It too, all the Canons seem to be really fast. The 2 Canons that we tested, they shoot at a really fast speed. I'm not even going to go through the rigmarole. This camera shot at 1/4 second as advertised. Well, I have to take that back. I just checked the numbers again. It actually was open for a whole half second. Pretty impressive, but also one of the noisiest cameras I own. One great thing about it, though, is if you hold the shutter release down, it'll take multiple shots. It'll actually go into an auto mode, which I did not know. And when I was testing this camera, I kept on thinking that the shutter was open, but it wasn't open. It wasn't open. What it was doing was repeatedly taking another shot, advancing the film and taking another shot. So at least I learned something about this camera. But the 0.5 seconds is one of the fastest of the slowest shutters, if that makes any sense. Okay, we're near the end of our slow motion shutter odyssey with the Mamiya M. Okay, I want to warn you, there's going to be a big bright red light hitting your eyes, like right now. Okay, it looked like, because I was blinded by that red light, that it started at 30.73 and ended at 31.12, but I cannot be sure when the shutter opened because the red light makes it very difficult to tell if the shutter is open or not. It changes the reflections in the lens, and that's how I've been able to tell whether or not the shutter is open. But with the presence of the red light glaring right into the camera, it's impossible. But let us say 0.40 seconds is the length of the shutter, which brackets it between half a second and a quarter second. And that's it. I'm JJ Lee, and this is theshuttergoesclick.blogspot.com. Thanks so much for hanging out with me and checking out what these cameras can do. If you indeed test your own camera and you have some footage, let me know that you've posted it and I'll share it with people. Have fun shooting out there. Until next time.